Hi, this is Jello, your gaming best friend, and today we are going to talk about the game that is worthy of discussion, and that's Dungeon Siege 3. Now, you might ask me, why did I say that? Don't worry, let's talk about that right now. Okay, so first things first, let's talk about the game's background, or a little bit about the background, a little bit about the game's history. Dungeon Siege 3, or should I say the Dungeon Siege series, has been known to be a multi-character dungeon crawler game. Yep, so that means that you will explore a lot of dungeons, and what's unique about Dungeon Siege is you control more than one characters. Just so that you know, Dungeon Siege 1, you can control up to 7 characters. Dungeon Siege 2, you can control up to 4 characters on the easy difficulty, and then if you move up the difficulty, you can control more characters. But the Dungeon Siege series has been known or has been popularized because of your capability to control more than one character, whether you want to control all of them at one time or just give commands to one and then let the other characters follow it. It's up to you, but the gameplay of Dungeon Siege has always been like that. Now for the third one, okay, Dungeon Siege 3, the game was produced by Square. Yes, Square, the one company that created Final Fantasy. The creators of Dungeon Siege 1 and 2 is Gas Powered Entertainment. So those are two different companies. Now, regarding the gameplay, Square changed the game from being a multi-character dungeon crawler into an action RPG in which you will only control a single character. Of course, you still have someone that could help you, an AI character. Now, the sad thing about that is the only thing that you could control is his skills and the armor that your partner will be wearing. I mean, for for gamers who are fan of the series, that might be a bad news. But for gamers who are not familiar with the series, that could be something good. Again, it really just depends upon what kind of gamer are you. But personally, I was a bit disappointed because when I started playing Dungeon Siege 3, I have an expectation that I want to be met, but sadly it wasn't. So, I mean, if you're going to look at the game itself, the game's gameplay, it is good. But again, I was a fan of the series, so it shouldn't be like that. But then again, if you want to play the game, let me talk more about it, okay? Now, let's talk about the good things that Dungeon Siege 3 has shown me. It improved so much on graphics and sounds. One of the things that I really love about Dungeon Siege 3 is its growth in graphics, okay? Because 1 and 2, there's a certain, what do you say that, culture or a certain nature about graphics that most of the characters almost like the same. Like they have the same eyes, the same nose, the same mouth. The only difference is their hairstyle, their voice, and their clothes. But they're practically the same character with a different appearance. Now in Dungeon Siege 3, that's no longer true. All of them, all of the characters have their own personality, have their own facial features, have their own differences in their body, which makes this game so detailed. Like, no more generic faces, no more generic reactions. They have their own unique expressions, which I love so much. Not only the characters are awesome, but also the environment. So it was a really complete wow when I saw the graphics and I went through the game. It was so awesome. Now regarding sounds, it was epic. The sounds of the game was so, I don't know, it was so epic that whenever you hear something, whenever you hear the music on solemn parts, on decision making time, on battle, it was really epic. Like it really could convey a lot of emotions, and I love it so much. Now, let's talk about the element that I love so much with DS3 is its story. Okay, now Dungeon Siege 1, Dungeon Siege 2 have great stories too, but the problem with that is those stories are so linear, and then they're like, what your goal is. But getting there, there's a lot of ups and downs just for you to defeat the last boss, and that's just really it. There's no, well, there are side quests, but they're not like you could skip them and be happy with it. Here at Dungeon Siege 3, the story is all about one mindset: rebuilding the Legion and defeating Jane Cassandra. Jane Cassandra is she is the main antagonist of the game, and she's the most powerful warrior that you could fight in the game too. Okay, now what I want also to mention is that because I was a bit disappointed about the game's gameplay, I was supposed to look at Dungeon Siege 3 as just a game by itself, like not connecting it to the first and the second game because the gameplay differences are so big. What I'm happy to see is that Dungeon Siege 3 connected the first and the second game. Like, it has a backstory, it has files telling the stories of the first one and the second one being part of the Dungeon Siege universe. Because when I played the first one and in the second one, I thought that those are just two different games because the timeline doesn't seem to correspond to each other. But for Dungeon Siege 3, they were able to successfully understand that Dungeon Siege 2 took place centuries ago, Dungeon Siege 1 happened years ago, and then here is Dungeon Siege 3, and I love it. The story was awesome. Okay. On top of that, another unique thing that I love about Dungeon Siege 3 is the decision-making parts. Yes, some portions of the game would require you to choose decisions, whether you want to kill an enemy or you want to set her free, or you want to be in favor of one and then be in favor of the other one. It's up to you. But your decisions will actually affect the story. So I love it because I felt that my decisions would actually affect the game, which makes it an experience that is worth trying, especially if you love those kind of games. Okay, so my bottom line about Dungeon Siege 3 is that if you're a fan of the series, you might be disappointed, but I would suggest you should just look at it as a game of its own and appreciate it with the story. After all, Dungeon Siege 3 has a good graphics, good sounds that you could appreciate, in a story that is worth telling. Okay, so for now, let me just go ahead with my recommendation. So I would recommend Dungeon Siege 3 is if, one, you are a fan of action RPGs, if you're a fan of those kind of games, action RPGs, Dungeon Siege is for you. And if you're someone who loves games with fabulous graphics, with not so, how should I say it, expensive or high specs, if you're using computers, also Dungeon Siege 3 is the game for you. And I hope that I was able to relay my thoughts about this game. If you have any questions, just leave a message and let me know your thoughts about the game. But for today, that's all for now. Once again, this is Jello, your gaming best friend. I hope you like this review. Have a great day.